Welcome back, everyone. Let us now go on to the next session of the day about making our cities smarter. It is a really, really international lineup. We have the moderator from Thailand. We've got the representative speaking from the Australia and New Zealand, and also from Korea, but not forgetting our very own Malaysian. So moderating this session is Dr. Non A, the Senior Expert in Smart City Promotion and Digital Economy Promotion Agency, or DEPA, in Thailand. Dr. Non A is an architect, urban designer, and smart city research and development specialist at DEPA. He advocates the concept and practice of smart cities and implements apt technological solutions to enhance the livelihood of citizens. Over to you, Dr. Non and the panelists.
Thank you so much, Hasru. So again, it's my honor to be here this morning with all of you here today. It's a very great panel, which I can't wait to actually hear more about. So before that, let me introduce our three distinguished speakers. In fact, I look at their profile, and I think if we're going to be reading out loud their profile, it's going to take a couple hours. So I'm just going to skip through and only highlight the best parts of each. Even the best parts are actually hard to pick out because they're so great, all of them. So let me start with Mark Thomas, who's a task force member of Smart City Council, Australia and New Zealand, and also a managing director of the Serviceworks group in New Zealand. So Mark, not only he's an entrepreneur, business leader, but also a smart city expert. He specializes in smart city development, focusing on mobility, city digitalization strategy, and new technology utilizations. And these are just tip of the iceberg. So you have about 35 more specializations that we could easily spend a couple hours going through this. So I'm going to let Mark kind of do his magic when we go into the panels to show us, what are the things that he already very experts in, and what are the things that he would like to share with us more. Second, we have Datuk Faizul, who's a co-founder of Sustainable Cities Industry Alliances Malaysia. So Datuk Faizul is a strategic advisor, technologist, and industry builder with 25 years of experiences in steering planning and execution aspects of policy, industry development, and game-changing in nation-building initiatives. So he's going to be talking to us with a lot of real experiences and things that are related not only just to policy, but also to practice. And he's the one who actually made Malaysia a platform to deliver the mission of smart city promotions. Last but not least, definitely not least, Mr. Chungha Shah, a good friend of mine, with whom I work in a couple of occasions, both for the Arts and Smart City Networks and beyond. So Chungha Shah is a co-founder and chair of Reimagining Cities Foundation, based in South Korea, but his work is actually spanned across the spectrums of fields and spectrum of geography, not only in Korea, but also beyond. So Shah has 20 plus years of work in finance, experience in finance, and since 2008, he's focused his path and his career on smart, resilient cities and innovation districts. And not only that, he also have a lot of experiences advising companies, advising cities on how to grow sustainably with the right and correct path toward a financial sustainability as well. So with these three panelists, I cannot think of a better questions to begin our panel than this one. So this is actually coming from some of the research that we have done in the past at the Digital Economy Promotion Agency where I work as a smart city expert. The question is, when we think of smart cities, we think of at least 3 or 4 elements of work that has to be done by the public, by the private, by the citizens themselves. So I just want to know what are the roles, what really are the roles of
He froze. Before we go to the questions, isn't Nick Faizul going to be presenting some slides?
You want me to proceed first?
Yeah, I think that was the plan, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps.
I guess we need our moderator. There we go.
All right.
Hey, Dr. Nguyen, I thought we're going to have the slides presentation first, and then we'll go into the questions.
All right. Okay, I'll proceed. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Dr. Non.
we're gonna have slide first, but the part that was missing when I dropped off was that I want to give you guys some heads up of the questions you're going to be getting after the presentation.
Okay, thank you. May I proceed?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much. I'm Dr. Nick, co-founder of SCIA Malaysia. We have formed this alliance about a year ago. And also the founder and CEO of the City Nexus to actually support the cities on the SDG 11 agenda. Just quick overview on SCIA introduction. Basically, we have a footprint in 25 cities in Malaysia. We have been involving in basically safe city programs, and now we actually going to next level into smartness, sustainable cities. We have 2 co-founders in the SCIA. I'm basically representing City Nexus. Our strength is basically on sustainable cities, strategy planning and systemized implementation. On QA tech side, it's more on sustainable city infrastructure and tech platforms. To date, our focus here so far, first year, is basically bringing in industry platform partners, such as on the open access internet, edutainment, smart government, waste management, mobility, and IoT infrastructure. We also have actually roped in Common Ground, our innovation hub partner, which has about 12,000 startup community throughout ASEAN. Hopefully by end of the year, we have another at least 17 will be new members into the platform. So the way we think about systemizing implementation is such that in Malaysia, at the end of the day, everybody is aiming for SDG 11 achievement. And in Malaysia, we have 2 key policy related to smart city agenda. One is smart city under Ministry of Housing and Local Government. Second is the low carbon cities under Ministry of Environment and Water. So under these 2 agenda, obviously we feel that it needs to be synergized together jointly as part of implementation, and we feel that there's a need to have a joint delivery office. The issue, like any other 3-tier government in any country, federal government is very strong, is coming up with new blueprint, new areas of readiness, new industry, new economies. But the bottom half of the country, which is the state and local government, there's a big gap in terms of delivering the policy agenda of the federal government. So we felt that there's a need to have a joint delivery office at the bottom half of the government through private-public partnership. And with that also, there's a need to have a data-driven cities because the end outcome for value creation, you need data. And then with the right business model, that you can achieve the outcome-based approach in terms of reduction in emission, data-driven reporting, predictive planning, savings, and new revenue sources. It's very important now these days for our local government, especially during COVID. We have local government now have less revenue because of the obvious reasons. So now how we can actually accelerate this, create more, improve operations and a new revenue source for them. SIA value add roles, basically, if you look from the smart city perspective, in Malaysia, we have 7 areas of smart city framework. And then the issue here is that the city agenda has lots of content, lots of stakeholders. So so far, there's no party coming in the middle, taking leadership to actually work with various parties, integrating the data and so forth. So here, SIA making a move here to actually bring parties together, the siloed industry together to actually partner with the government. And secondly, on the low carbon cities program, we saw earlier launch. Smart City was launched 2 years ago. Low carbon city was launched actually in 2011. Quite a while already, almost 10 years. Malaysia more established than Smart City. And then with a target for 2030 in terms of 200 low carbon zone and 1,000 low carbon partners. Here, through another co-founder of SCIA, KiwiTech has partnered with Malaysia Green Tech. So through KiwiTech, SCIA will actually be coming in together as a local level delivery partner to actually have working with local government to deliver the agenda. Because local government these days, as you know, they are limited in resources. Coming with a new agenda, they do not have new manpowers, new budgets to do that. Fully depending mostly with federal government. So here we coming in as private sector with our technology capability, funding, and implementation. So the way we do here is basically setting the foundation on cities in terms of connecting various solutions together into the city dashboard and integrated operation center. So normally when we do with cities, we set the foundation in 3 areas. One is strengthening local level governance, meaning that we partner with cities for 5 years, set up the 5-year action plan, set up the data governance, open and protected data policy, and some capacity building. Then move on to second area in terms of strengthening the infrastructure, in terms of the safe city element, integrated operation center, and smart poles. And as well as the IoT infrastructure. Third is obviously bringing in with that, then we bring in the smart solutions of our various of our partners. So this is, I feel that there's the need to have a more holistic approach in terms of setting the foundation for the city agenda. The implementation framework that way we do is that we need to bridge. The issue now is a chicken and egg in cities between government and private sector, between market and supply. So how we come in the middle, we felt that City Innovation Hub is very critical to actually create a platform for collaboration of various city communities, academia, private sector, government, and so forth. So, but our current focus now is more working on market and supply side through SIA. And then we deeply recommend that the government make a move, that there's an urgent need for City Innovation Hub at the local level. Moving on to on the joint delivery office, take an example, one of city that we're working on, that there needs to be a team, a joint delivery team between the local government and the private sector. So here we are playing our role in terms of planning the delivery, setting guidelines on the implementation and so forth, as well as syndicating with funders for project implementation. And the partnership structure obviously is that reporting directly to the mayor and as well as the president, incorporating, synergizing various departments as well as other project partners. So this is the GDO that we are actually practicing. On data-driven cities and business model is very important. Sorry. Firstly, on data-driven city, this is a courtesy of KiwiTech, the co-founder also, another co-founder of SCIA, has invested in terms of creating some data maturity model for cities in collaboration with we have worked with currently working with the Chief Data Officer of San Diego and Boston, where they have experience in terms of delivering the data-driven city agenda at the local level. So, for example, most cities in Malaysia at the baseline of level 0. So our role here is basically how to actually bring them next year to level 1 city, and then hopefully by end of the 5th year collaboration, we were able to actually bring them to the end game or level 4 city, whereby they're able to actually have a more predictive planning and then enjoy OPEX savings, new revenue sources, and so forth. So to us, AI is absolutely critical to us, and then we need to actually accelerate much earlier. So that is on the data-driven cities. On business model, obviously with cloud-based and so forth, maturity, very much cloud services. So we are advocating smart city as a service to the government. It can avoid government capex. Now with the limited resources of government, now we actually can start offering OPEX model to governments to minimize maintenance risks, minimize technology risks, as well as for faster deployments. This is the second last slide on the sustainable future. We felt that there needs to be very cyclic activity between market supply and innovation for us to keep on evolving as a platform, so that as we grow, the value of the government services will increases, and the interfering the interconnectivity between demand and supply through the innovation hub. So I would like to stress also the hub is very important here. So last slide, just a takeaway from there is that to the government, we encourage to leverage on SCIA as single contact point for private sector collaboration, and then do adopt OPEX-based services for faster delivery and improving cash flows of local governments. Please accelerate. To do that, you need to accelerate data governance and open data policy for value creation and so forth. So to private sector, we are encouraging also leverage on an SCIA platform as market access, and then also platform for collaboration, and also as industry voice to the government. Currently, our industry very siloed, and then very micro level. So how we can come together and then work partner with the government to deliver the agenda. And then we also hope that we can actually form SCIA in other APEC countries for cross-border collaboration. Purely SCIA is purely for we have observed there are other smart city collaboration networks around APEC countries, but our focus is purely more on implementation. Not beyond just knowledge sharing. And then on the innovation accelerators, we also encourage to leverage the SCIA platform as pipeline to market. Obviously, Malaysia's strength, last year, Malaysia was second after China for high middle income countries in terms of global innovation. So there is a strength of Malaysia, but the issue here is that our startup do not have a platform, an ecosystem to actually for them to grow. So we do encourage use SCIA as a platform for that, for piloting technology innovations and scaling up of industry ecosystems. And lastly, for investor, how through more systemized approach, the investments and funders can actually plan and populate investment through single platform, and reduce investment risk through systemized implementation, as well as syndicate funding more effectively. So with that, those are my takeaways for now. And with that, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Faizul. So pretty much you answered the questions that I posed already. So I'm just going to hand it over to Mark, perhaps. So you remember the question. So what is it that you think the roles that the Smart City Councils play have to do with the Smart City promotions in practice?
Great question, Dr. Non. Thank you, everyone. Good to be part of this panel, and thank you for that fascinating overview of how things are developing, Datuk Nick, in Malaysia. I think with the Smart Cities Council framework, which of course is a global organisation, I'm part of the Australia-New Zealand Smart Cities Council. We operate in the US, Europe, and in India. And I think our role is multifold. We obviously use the membership base we have to kind of leverage specific projects, infrastructure projects. So that's partnering with cities, particularly those, I guess, who are resource constrained. And Datuk Nick made the comment that cities are, of course, even more COVID constrained in this time. And so resource constrained. And so what our members have been able to do is to help cities prioritize even more sharply than before on what the key infrastructure projects. And I guess, COVID has really given us a sort of almost a preoccupation, as if infrastructure in our cities wasn't already important. Frankly, either weaknesses have been exposed or delayed investment decisions have been exposed as a consequences of some of the challenges, right, that COVID has placed with us on our city. So the council has a role leveraging member capability. I think the other thing we're trying to do is to kind of lead the thinking. And I was part of a task force a year or so ago that looked at what was happening with mobility. In most cities, mobility is the city function that's been changing the most. I say that comment before COVID, of course, because as we know, some things have changed. But generally speaking, pre-COVID, mobility was of those functions. And so what a group of us got together was to say, well, what is happening now with mobility? Because many of us have seen the disruptions and changes that are taking place in our streets, whether it's e-bikes a few years ago to shared scooters, other mobility devices, a proliferation of platforms, right? It seems we have to have an increasing number of apps on our phone for the different ways we can travel. And so what the council does is says, well, that can't be the answer, having lots of online wallets for our apps. What's a more effective response? And so we led thinking, Mobility Now is the name of the document. Anyone could go online and have a look at that, search for the ANZ Smart Cities Council Mobility Now. And we had 6 big areas where cities need to now be changing their plans. Technology is obviously one, how data is governed and how data is collected, but it's also how to make decisions more quickly, because it's pointless having a more effective data collection, an open data environment, right? When actually the information going to the city decision makers or the transport regulatory authorities is not being made more quickly. We looked at the way city planning needs to change. We looked at equity issues. We looked at how this technology age we're in now has to solve some of the big equity problems we've got with people who have access problems. And so we painted a picture of the challenges we're all too aware of and said, cities are dealing with these in a range of different ways. This is mobility now. It's not mobility in the future. These things are happening now. And so that's an example, I suppose, of some of the scene setting and advice we give also as part of the work we do on the Smart Cities Council.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. How about you, Chungha? Your microphone is not on. Classic problem. We always have that problem. I think we all have that.
Sorry about that. That question was pretty hard, and I think Mark did a really good job of answering that. Can you ask me an easier question?
It would only be fair for you to answer that first for the next questions to come your way.
Well, I don't know. I kind of smart cities, low carbon cities, sustainability, resilient cities. It's so broad. And the governments, I take the position that we need money to solve these problems. And the governments do not have enough money to solve these pressing challenges, imminent challenges, if we are to believe that climate change is right around the corner, meaning we're running out of the carbon budget in less than 10 years. And we need to bend this curve down, meaning drive down greenhouse gas emissions over the next 5 years, start to bend it down. So, I am in finance for over 20 years. So I like to try to make things simple and try to attack just a small part of it. And we like to work with real estate investors and developers to try to create, for example, the UN has forecasted that we're building the size of London every month. And half of that is in Asia. So I'm sure part of that is in Malaysia, part of that is in, Thailand, certainly China and India. So what can we do to build safe, resilient, or healthy, carbon neutral, large real estate developments? And work with the real estate developers and investors to align their development objectives with the government objectives of a cleaner future. So these days I'm focusing pretty much on the real estate developments and how we can align it with the overall objectives of resilient cities, low carbon cities.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around the very great ideas that I just got from Mark and Chungha, and of course, Datuk as well. I think the big elephant in the room that here in Thailand we're trying to solve too is how do we get from 0 to 1, which is very difficult because it doesn't make sense to us a lot of time when things at work. People don't replicate that. People just want to go and reinvent the wheel, or they just refuse it outright, and that might be because of the level of obstacles along the way. It could be psychological all the way to finance. So my question is here. Well, according to what Chungha was talking about, the idea is that if you want to build good cities, you need somebody to finance it. But on the other hand, there's a dilemma that the only way you can finance something like that is that you have a clear path towards profits, which in many cases, in many cities, especially public cities like municipalities, they don't do things for that alone. They do things for sustainability. They do things for job creations, which doesn't lead directly to a calculatable profit margins towards the end of the program. So my question is here to all of you. You can anyone want to take this up first? Please feel free to. How do we actually get from 0 to 1 practically?
I can take that, Dr. Non. So my advice with the cities we work is to follow a threefold process. The first is you have to start with a plan which responds to needs. This does not need to be, as most public sector documents are, 90, 100, 400 pages. The most important thing is you've got an identification of what the compelling needs are, maybe the top 3 needs in your city, or in your region, whatever the jurisdiction is you're talking about. Be driven by the needs, and then some kind of plan that responds. Secondly, what's the technology, if technology is part of your solution? And smart solutions are not always solutions that involve technology. There's lots of ways you can be smart that don't use technology. What can you afford and what can you operationalize? And I put those together because it's pointless getting some attractive system in that a vendor who you have a relationship with provides if you don't have the capability within your organization to operationalize it. And thirdly, what are the results that you're going to be producing to the citizens, your citizen shareholders or stakeholders, however you prefer to think of them, that kind of justifies both their investment in the activity, but also how progress is going to track. So part of that 0 to 1, that 0 to 1, and for a moment I was slightly talking about, I thought you were talking about your climate change targets, and I thought that if 0 to 1's where you're at, you're in a better position than the rest of us. But those 3 things are what I talk about. A plan that's focused on needs, because that gets the politicians interested, that gets the citizens interested. Technology that actually you can afford and operationalize, and that doesn't have to be a whole big new system. And lastly, a results dashboard, or look, even just a piece of paper that you're regularly updating and sharing. So start with those 3 things as kind of, I suppose, the matrix for whatever the activity is, the smart activity is that you're going to progress.
Right. From my point of view, I think to get started is very key. Once you're in with the city, then we can actually plan together and then deliver the agenda with them. But the issue here is that how to get started. So, such as in Malaysia, we have 152 local councils. And then the issue here is that in our cities, I'm not sure elsewhere, but in Malaysia, most president mayors, they are administrators by background. And then dealing with new city agenda also is a challenge. And then what we are focusing is that we are looking for who the strong leadership at the local level. So most of the city that we go to, we work with a strong leadership, the mayors and presidents. And then we also have capacity building they are lining up. For example, the Bloomberg and Harvard City Leadership Program also do provide leadership program for mayors and presidents of cities. This is very important, especially for Malaysia, that to get things moving on the ground, they are very key to actually deliver the agenda. We are just purely enabler and to facilitate the delivery. Thanks.
I'd like to add, you said pragmatic solutions, or where do we start? And why don't we just start with a new community development, a large piece of real estate, not a publication or a research study, but an actual project where some of the objectives of the city could be low carbon development, a healthy, a lighthouse project so that people, the stakeholders, the government, the citizens, the investors, the architect, the builders, they can all come in and evaluate or develop the plan as to how to build that community for 5,000 people, for 20,000 people as a lighthouse project. The key thing is that you have to first look at that development and set the baseline, meaning we're doing this for a couple of projects, but we first say, how much would it cost roughly to build that community in accordance with the current building codes? And the building codes, I would assume, is one metric that we like to see is the energy use intensity. And so it's at 150 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. It's going to cost you $1 billion US. Per square foot, it will be, or per square meter, it's X. So that's the baseline. And the investors, private investors, would look at that and we calculate a return. And we would do that under those circumstances. So from that baseline, where do we want to get to that target kind of lighthouse? And one would be, green areas would be not 50%, or not 40%, but we wanted 50%. We want, energy use intensity or a low carbon development to be below 100 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum, whatever it may be. And then we can calculate compare the baseline to the best practice and how much more we would have to spend. And if we focus on energy, which I like, energy, if you drive that down, you can reduce greenhouse gases, but at the same time, you reduce your operating expenses so that you can get higher annual profits. So the higher annual profits, investors would be willing to spend more money to get that. So it's only when you can compare those two scenarios can you demonstrate to the private investors and I'm talking billions of dollars of investors, you can demonstrate to them the practical differences of, do you want to just build it to current code, or do you want to help the city achieve a low carbon development? And then we can calculate aspire to build this showcase or lighthouse project for all to experience. And you still make money.
Wow, okay, thank you so much for that. I think there are three very important points here. I think we're going to come back to this after, if you still have time towards the end. I think what Mark was alluding to, which is the ideas of taking steps to identify demands from needs of the citizens and use that as a point of departure for co-creations of projects that are scalable. It's definitely important, which of course seems to have a little bit of a, I wouldn't say contradictions, but probably a little bit of a dilemma with what Chungha was just saying, because it seems as though, you know, if the citizen believe in carbon, lower carbon emissions, then that's great. That interest is aligned with that of the government and that of everyone else. But in the case that it's not aligned, you know, what would be the right way to prove that the metrics that Chungha was trying to put in place would be valid? Because that's also a lot of problems that we got, and which is kind of nice that Datuk was talking about leadership and capacity buildings and how the ideas of smart city literacy can come from above, in the context of giving the literacy to city leaders to understand how to actually maneuver the interests of the public and the interests of the private citizens, which might be in conflicts in some of the cases.
Hey,
So
and I want to be a little bit provocative here. You just said that, about low carbon development and whether the citizens want that or not. I want to be a little bit provocative. For every development going forward, it better be low carbon developments, period, right? And it's up to us all to make sure that happens quickly. We're not going to you don't need to take a survey to say, do you think low carbon is important for our future? I think we all know that it's
urgent.
You know, we got to do this, right?
Well, I totally agree, and I think that was the reason why I laugh a little bit when I realized, as I confused Mark a little bit when I said 0 to 1. 0 to 1 is Peter Thiel's metaphor for startups, right? How do you get startups off the ground? And I realized that what Mark was alluding to was the 16 tons per person annually to zero as a metaphor for reduced consumption and then of course reduce carbon emissions. Anyway, we have a question from the floor. Anyone can take this one. There are many countless frameworks for smart cities. Currently, main point of solving issues for cities operations and its people, but how is these frameworks being adopted, as technology adoption model is always an issue regardless of geography or people. So the question is how to measure the smart carbon transport monitoring. Can you give some examples? What are the tolerable values and how much percentage is considered high? Well, I might be reading this too fast. In other words, I think that's kind of goes back to what we just discussed about it. I mean, I like how the question from the floor is framed with this adjective, tolerable. You know, what is it that we can take? What is it that we cannot take? What is it that beyond the capacities of private citizens to take? What is beyond capacity of the environment to actually absorb? What is it that we are talking about when we're talking about metrics that would help cities becoming more sustainable?
Sure, Dr. Nam, maybe let me respond in two ways. Maybe more at a kind of a systemic emerging future level. The emerging future is relevant because in just a few hours, I think it is the IPCC will do their 5-yearly update about how the planet's tracking. So this is the UN interplanetary, the global reference point on how we're doing climate change, right? The famous IPCC. In about 4 hours, they'll update us. They only do this every 5 years. The news is going to be bad. And so that, just to your earlier point, if there are any citizens who are under a rock somewhere in disbelief, they could stay tuned to the news because it'll be a global news event. But the good news is that technology is helping us, right, with this. And so as cities and partners find a way to have 5G progressing, and I know it's slow in some countries, you know, as we get more and quicker ways of getting computational data, and 5G is a catalyst for more effective AI and progressively quantum computing, which just allows us to crunch more granular, more real-time information. So that technology context gives us the ability to monitor climate, water, these atmospheric factors that in some cities are impossible to track, right? So some of the reasons we don't have dashboards in every city on these sorts of measures is because funding is always an issue, right? But getting the technology up to a speed where it's useful, it's actually, it returns positive on the business case. So the technology, I mean, it's an incentive, in fact, to spend money in these areas because better ways of monitoring these environmental regressions that are happening in all cities then provides us the ability to say that's unacceptable. We've got some data on this now. We're monitoring it in real time. We can set a public dashboard in place, hopefully on the open data platform that our city's got, to kind of put positive pressure on citizens, because I mean, you can't regulate your way out of climate change, right? You really can't. We've got to ultimately send enough steers to citizens that they make different choices, and that, you know, investors make different choices. And Char's really an expert in terms of guiding big investors into making more smarter decisions. So my answer to your question, it's a bit long, is stay tuned for the IPPC update. But be even more focused for those who are listening to this, who are investors or partners of investors, on the technology tools that cities could advance to be able to do a better job of managing and monitoring those sorts of things, so we can report better and take more action more quickly.
I'm in a provocative mood today, Mark. You know, you mentioned IPCC, and they're going to come up with their 5-year update, and that technology can measure. The technology, and that it's going to make these things better. It's not making it better, right? Greenhouse gases continue to increase year upon year upon year, and taking 5-year updates, we should be having like live data provided to see this real time in the cities that can make a difference, right?
That's what I'm saying.
We don't have to have it in every city, but we would like to have it in Kuala Lumpur and Bangkok, right? And Seoul and New York. But you don't have to do with, you know, tiny cities that are 50,000 people. The C40 is a member city of, it initially started with the largest 40 cities in the world, responsible for 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So we just have to focus on the 40 for now, to just kind of get a grasp of what technology can do and collect the data real time. I don't understand why we're not collecting the data real time, right?
I suppose the technology is ready, ever ready these days, fast evolving. I think the issue here is that getting the right formula at specific local level to actually dealt with it. And the issue here is that the gap between government and private sector, because the government look at private sector at project level only. So for SCIA, we look at the government at program level first, not to enter at project level. So that is kind of a midpoint between the two parties to actually neutralize the self-interest and then to go at program level for 5 years. So that is very important approach, in our opinion, that you don't actually go at project level first with local council, because then things will get very detailed, very commercial, and so forth. So I think the context of going on the 5 years is very important, so that will also facilitate our industry partners business planning also in more stable manner. So that is very important.
Well, I think you're right, but what I'm trying to say is that, are we going to measure real time or not? Right? In today's digital age, I just can't understand why we would take these annual 5-year updates when we should be having updates every minute.
Fully
right?
agree. Fully agree.
Yeah. So now it's up to us and governments and private sector to say, do we want real-time data on greenhouse gas emissions? And if so, and I think we would all agree, then we try to find efforts and money and make the private sector contribute to this, because governments don't, have enough money, right?
Yes.
So you gotta get the private big businesses to contribute real money to start this global platform. And it's not really that much money, right?
I think just collaboration is key. I think government needs to be more open on collaboration on the private-public partnership. And then all this we need this yesterday, as you agree. So yes, collaboration is key.
But in the cities I'm familiar with COVID, and that's been unfortunately just New Zealand and Australia's cities this last year. I mean, some of them moved very quickly with technology when it came to location monitoring, right? When we were all focused on contact tracing and where people are, our transport authorities actually implemented 6 sensor networks in a couple of weeks, right? Obviously, the bones were there. But we demonstrated in the COVID crisis times last year the ability to move quickly with technology to start measuring things when it mattered, right? So maybe we kind of need, I don't want to say this, but do we need more acute climate crises to force us to respond in the same way we did with COVID?
Yeah, agreed.
Perhaps we do.
Well, thank you so much for that. I think what we agree here is that the open data is really important. And I think mobility and environment, as our panelists is agreeing upon here, are actually quite very important data that once they open up, they could actually be useful. And as Datuk mentioned in the beginning throughout his slides, the idea of innovation accelerator is very important. And there are many research that show that once governments open up the data, then a lot of startups and SMEs can actually benefit from better planning, better design, and of course, a better maneuvering of resources so that it fits better with the purposes of the Smart City program. Then we have another question. This is my own question, disguised as a question from the floor, because it only sounds good that way, because otherwise I'll just be dominating these discussions. I think that one of the keywords in this panel is resiliency. And the problem with resiliency is that we've been facing, and a lot of research from a lot of international organizations have shown that many governments don't feel as though it is that important because it hasn't happened yet. So the ideas of protective frameworks for natural disaster, or even for something that could have been a little bit of both, like COVID-19, happen to be something that a lot of cities hasn't really planned for this black swan occurrences, and therefore when it happened, it was too late. So how do we? Well, let me start with something very from the bottom up. How do we start with the basic conversation starter about how important this is, and how do we jump right into getting people to be convinced, especially stakeholders, to want to put a lot of framework in place in order to make sure that the cities that they are living in or they are leading are resilient enough for all these kind of catastrophes?
I think that I saw something World Economic Forum did a month or so ago, looking at kind of what's going to change with kind of the risk updates that really all businesses and authorities do, right? So one of the things that they're saying will absolutely change is, how we deal, what resilience means now in these COVID times. So that's thinking about, cybersecurity. We know that there are cities and states that kind of had quite big threats during COVID that they weren't able to respond to. Some cities had big energy problems, cities had water problems. I'm putting aside climate issues here. I'm just saying resilient issues associated with perhaps delayed infrastructure investments. So I think one consequence of COVID has to be that, again, we don't have to think of a new process, right? Because cities have lots on their plate. They tend not to really like new things so much. We can just use the standard risk frameworks that all cities have and think, actually, resilience means something different now, because no one planned for the pandemic, right? No city I know had, okay, we're going to have a global pandemic. How do we deal with that? And guess what? I mean, I don't want to say we coped, because we're still coping, but we showed the ability to kind of respond and cope. And obviously some countries and cities coped better and some much worse. But I think I want that to be a catalyst for change in terms of how we think about resilience, because I think, when we come to doing the big reviews about this, and actually because of the climate priorities, we don't really have time to do big reviews. We kind of want to maintain the learning by doing, bias, which has been a key part of responding to COVID, and think, well, resilience means actually being a lot quicker to make investment decisions, a lot clearer about what the core priorities are, because we demonstrated we did that last year, and in fact, in some places are still doing it now. So let's redesign resilience, which is this kind of long-term 30-year thing we've always talked about, and build it into our risk frameworks. A tool we already use is something that requires more action from our cities more quickly.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Mark. I think, but you know, that thing about long-term thing, yeah, what are we going to do? Carbon neutral by 2050. But these days, what are we going to do in the next 5 years? Right? And, you know, working together with ULI, Urban Land Institute, Asia Pacific, and the Resilient Cities Council, what we're talking about is, what are we going to do over the next 12 months? Right? And I think these discussions should be focused more on, okay, resilience, what are we going to do over the next 12 months? And I really recommend each one of us to bring that to that kind of dialogue to the people that we speak with. What are we going to do in the next 12 months?
Let me throw in one big question here, and I'm probably going to start with Datuk for these questions. There's a concept in behavioral economics called libertarian paternalism. Well, I don't know where I'm going with this, but the idea is that when we talk about we, who are we? Are we talking about citizens? Are we talking about city leaders? Because their interests are definitely not always in cahoot with one another. And the problem we have here is that if the citizens believe that the best way for them to live their life is to have choices, but the cities believe that the choices should be limited, because more choices mean, you know, more chances, more opportunities for wasting resources. Then we actually see how the interests of at least the two parties who are very important to city buildings are not in tandem anymore. So how do we align that interest?
Look, I have to go in 2 minutes. So may I jump in there?
Sure.
I've been a city leader, so I was an elected member of Auckland Council for 2 terms, right? Sort of deputy chair of my local council. Somebody has to lead. Now, actually, I don't care who leads. I don't care if the citizens throw the hopeless government out and take control. I'd prefer democracy to work and elected leaders to be responsible. But if we've got this disconnect where the citizens think one thing and the leaders think another thing, I mean, that's hopeless, right? So certainly nothing's going to happen. But let's that be a catalyst in this time of crises for some leader somewhere. And I always talk about this when I speak in KL. You don't need a smart city officer. You don't need a chief executive or a mayor. You need one inspired person to seize control, right? And so that's got to be the advocacy in these times to take charge. Someone take charge, because the problems and challenges are all too clear and all too present. I'm sorry I have to leave you, but I've got a flight I have to catch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, don't miss your flight, and definitely have a safe trip. Thank you so much. So
thank you, everyone. Great to catch up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Okay. All right. So we probably get to the final parts of our session here. So I have this question for both of you. A few years ago, Harvard universities went around the campus and asked their famous professors, and I think you guys are in the same level as famous professor at Harvard. That's why I'm asking this question to you. The question was, if you can change one thing about human beings that could change the future of mankind for good, what would that be? In the context of smart cities, of course. Yeah.
I think to me, the change is more the attitude and the way we look at things, and everything is yesterday now, especially with respect of climate agenda. And then there needs to be sense of urgency on the ground. We hope that government have a greater sense of urgency of the need, and then needs to actually work around the current regulatory issues that we are facing us, because most important is the climate agenda. So That's where the sandbox role is also important, the regulatory sandbox which government has formed, that we actually bringing in together as part of the SCIA initiative also, because a lot of our new game-changing solution to address urbanization and climate change requires some tweaking of the regulatory issues also. So that is very critical in our opinion. That's my.
Can I urge you to be a little bit more specific, because for instance, Professor Steven Pinker, who is a psychology professor at Harvard, he argues that if human beings take anecdotes as anecdotes and not as data, we will be better human beings, because we will be driven by data and not just stories, not just emotionalities. And that's what he believed in. I thought that was a good point to make, because we are living in an era whereby data is plenty. You can make use of it. So taking from what you just said, are you saying that we should, and one thing that could change the way in which humans live in smart cities would be the way the government works in how they create smart cities?
I then have more objectivity through data rather than subjectivity, and with objectivity can align better the various stakeholders and so forth.
Okay, thank you. That was great. To you, Chungha, and please be provocative. I never anything less than that from you.
Well, I really have no comment on that one. How can we be better human beings? Is that what we're trying to?
Well, no. If one thing you can change about who we are and would make us the better human beings, and make the environments and make everything that we are living in much more sustainable, what would that be? And one of the examples that Datuk gave was that city change can change.
I would like to just say is, why don't we all focus on what we can do individually to contribute to whatever we think the better future is, right? And I don't know, we talk a lot about what the government should be doing, what big business should be doing, what they should be doing. What are you doing right now? Are you still drinking from that plastic bottle, water bottle, like 3 or 4 or 5 times a day? And drinking coffee from that paper cup that we use like for 5 minutes and then we throw that away? Are we, consuming responsibly? There are so many things, right? I do what I do. I still eat meat. I just love meat. And some people will say, oh, you gotta, become a vegetarian because cows emit greenhouse gases. I can't give up meat. My wife and I, we love beef, but we do other things, right? I try not to use plastic bottles or straws, or I compost my food waste in the garden. We do what we can. When I take a shower, I turn the water off and then I soak myself, right? And then I'll turn the water back on.
Chung, let my turn to be provocative also. Basically, based on your statement, actually, I mean, the fact of the matter is that we cannot do it alone. So that's where we need to actually work with others, and then alignment is very, very key because people coming from various backgrounds. That's where the issue here is that where SCIA is encouraging and then promoting a lot for government, you need to set up the city innovation hubs. In Malaysia, we have the urban transformation centers, UTC they call it, but that's very operational. Purely for renewing passport, your IDs and so forth. So there need to be a developmental platform for city, especially the bigger city in Malaysia, to bring other people together. Meetings no longer need to be in the city hall's office, because then there is the city government mindset coming in. You need to be a neutral place. Virtually it can be now even easier, that how government and others take out their hat and then try to achieve the common agenda on the city. So that's where we feel that the city agent innovation hub in Malaysia is still non-existent, and then it's absolutely urgent. So we hope we can actually work closely with government on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That reminds me of I don't know what the term was, but it sounds something like a little person fallacy. The idea is that a lot of citizens don't think that their action matters because you're just one person. You know, I can just drink water from the bottle, and it doesn't matter because I'm just one person within this world of 4 billion people. But then, as Chungha mentions, I think a lot of aggregate efforts from a little person like us actually can be combined and then actually make a lot of difference in how we lower carbon footprint as humanities altogether. So thank you so much. This is it's been a great pleasure for me to moderate this panel. I'm taking 7 pages of notes with my fountain pen because I wanted to make sure that I'm good for the environment. I don't know why I'm saying that, but the point is that we have a grand tour of smart cities knowledge. You know, starting off with how do we do this, the scalability issues, how do we get people involved, and all the way to how do we think about steps that we can take in promoting resiliency, safetiness, and of course sustainable future, with a lot of ideas and a lot of course provocative ideas from Shah. And always, as always, this has been a great pleasure for me. And I think this conversations will not end here. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We just start to kind of scratch the surface of a lot of interesting issues to come. And of course, I would like to thank Malaysia Tech Month for inviting all 4 of us on the panel and have this discussion. So definitely, I believe that after this, I'm going to be talking to some of my teams and some of my executives at the Smart City Office of Thailand to see whether we can take some of these from these experts, to take forward as an idea for smart city promotion here in my country as well. So thank you so much for your time, Chungha Shah, Datuk, and of course, Mark Thomas, who already left us a few minutes earlier because of the flight he has to catch. Thank you so much and have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Non, and all our wonderful panelists, the panel members, interesting discussion on the updates on smart cities in the Asia Pacific region and beyond, the needs, the wants, the future of local governments and nation building through public-private partnerships. Okay, we will now be moving forward to our next session, and it will be beginning shortly. To all the participants, do click join session and also complete the survey for each session as we strive to continuously serve you better. See you in a while.